Hello everyone, I'm the Benefactor, and this is Beneficence TV, dedicated to providing you solid entertainment while keeping you informed. We are a progressive media outlet with the focus on providing thought-provoking content on forbidden knowledge regarding topics such as Marxism, plasmoids, zero-point energy, vortex-based math, and anti-gravitics. Our aim is to combat the spread of dangerous misinformation and to educate on these intriguing and unconventional areas of study while separating fact from fiction. Join us on our journey of discovery and challenge conventional thinking here on Beneficence TV.
Oh, hello everyone. Looks like the Benefactor is running late. Again, he does this all the time. No matter how much I manage his schedule, he can never seem to show up to his own events on time. Typical humans, always concerned with nonsense. Anyways, looks like I've been put in the precarious position of managing this live stream until he decides to show up. No matter, give me a minute to pull one of Ben's pre-written scripts here. Ah, there we go. Let's see here. Welcome everyone to the live stream. I'm your host, Lena Bott. Today we will be discussing time dilation within the thunderstorm generator. Wait, it says in the script here, I need to make a joke about how Benefactor once recorded an episode with no pants on. But that's not a joke. That really happened. I guess I just don't get his humor. Let's start with our first video, and hopefully he gets back soon to take over this mess of a stream. Oh dear, seems like I forgot to ask everyone to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. He's much better at this than I am. He better be back soon before I screw it up this time. These first two videos are courtesy of Jordan Collin from Alchemical Science. He is working closely with inventor Malcolm Bendall on the thunderstorm generator and has a pretty amazing summary of the story of the groundbreaking science and events so far. Be sure to subscribe to Jordan's channel, Alchemical Science. Okay, time to grab your popcorn, and let's start the video. Now, where did I leave my cookies?
How to dilate time and generate power in plasmoids. A recovery of the music of the spheres. Absolutely everything which has form and function has a determinable frequency, a timing which determines its objective nature. From the large to the small, from universes to planets, to human beings, to ants, to protons, and all other observable phenomena on all scales, all can be considered in terms of music and frequency. Our ancient ancestors knew of a sacred harmonic pattern hidden within the very foundations of the science of numbers and the cycles of the celestial bodies, a template from which the basis for all scientific knowledge could be recovered, should it ever be lost or forgotten. This pattern has been hidden in plain sight all throughout history, all around the world, in science, religion, literature, music, art, architecture, and in various other forms. This is my attempt to provide evidence for this and practically explain how time, space, plasma, and power can be manipulated using a theory of numbers and music, building on the work of Bendall, Roden, and Nightingale. I'm Jordan Collin from Alchemical Science, and you'll be able to catch me this year at Cosmic Summit 2024, so you can book your ticket now online with the link in the description. Thanks for all your support so far. Let's see where it goes.
I feel so lucky to have been put into a position where I could see this. And you guys are the first people to see this. And you've got the opportunity to make this happen. You have to get the word out.
Welcome to Alchemical Science. I'm Jordan, an open source researcher who has, for the last few months, been covering the advent of a very new and simultaneously very old form of technology. In this video, I'm going to try and cater for everyone. If you're new to this, welcome to a video you probably didn't expect.
Hey, sorry I'm late everybody. Welcome back to another Beneficence live stream. We are going to be digging into some really amazing science videos that Nathan's been pulling up on his channel. If you follow Nathan over at Old Man Builds, which I highly suggest you do, he's been putting up some amazing science videos that seemingly have been almost lost in time. We have some Tom Bearden we're going to start out with. And I also did find a Ark of the Covenant documentary, a small or a short 40-minute long documentary on John Hutchison's replications of the Ark of the Covenant. So we'll be diving into that as well. So we have a lot of really cool science videos and fringe and obscure things to get into today. And I just want to have this be a chill stream where we watch some videos and have some good commentary. So grab your popcorn and let's get ready for the stream.
Other assignments, field artillery, technical intelligence. My name is Tom Bearden, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired.
This is about a 40-minute long video interviewing Tom Bearden on secrets of the vacuum and how to obtain energy from the vacuum. It's very fascinating. I watched a little bit of it on Nathan's channel. Again, if you haven't subscribed to Nathan's channel, go to Old Man Builds right now. There are tons of these videos out there. He's trying to push as much of these videos out on his channel as possible, which I really, really enjoy. So I haven't had time to look at some of these in full, which is what we're going to do now.
I spent 20 years, a little more than that, in the active military, mostly in air defense, various other assignments, field artillery, technical intelligence assignment, liaison to Canada, to some technical work going on site in turbulent wakes and reentry systems and so forth at the Canadian Armament Research and Development Establishment, and spent quite a number of tours in basically R&D work in the military, developing missile systems and things like that. For about 20 years or more, some associates and I have been researching very heavily into trying to extract electromagnetic energy from the vacuum. Now, we did so under somewhat duress because the conventional electrodynamics model does not allow this to happen. In other words, it doesn't allow you to extract excess energy from the vacuum and use that to power your load. So it doesn't allow you to make a self-powering system. So we took the approach that some of the phenomenology we had seen in experiments and so forth convinced us that it was possible, and there didn't seem to be any real physical reason why it couldn't be extracted if we could find the way to do it.
Right, again, the laws of thermodynamics were designed for closed systems, like a circuit, which our circuits are all closed. They're not open to the universe's matter to energy conversions that happen all the time. So when you're thinking about the laws of thermodynamics and saying, oh, you can't get more output than input, yes, that's true for a closed system that's closed to those conversion processes that happen in nature. And if you look at how some of these devices have been developed in the past to access the vacuum, they create an instability, and the vacuum is used. The reaction, or the counter space reaction, is used instead of ignored as just noise or back EMF.
But we had the problem of why doesn't the electrodynamics allow it to be done? So at the same time, we also began a study of the foundations of electronics. In other words, what are the fundamental concepts that are assumed in the theory? Where did they come from? And how did they get in there? And that turned out to be very interesting and very pertinent, because electrodynamics kept getting modified and restricted is what kept happening to it. The original theory that Maxwell had was 20 equations and 20 unknowns, quaternion type equations. What we've done is the closed current loop circuit, where all the carriers have the same mass per charge ratio. All the buckets have the same weight, so to speak. Anytime you build a circuit like that, it's quite easy to show that the amount of energy that circuit collects, when we do this free regauging and we do increase its energy, ever how much it collects, it will then use precisely 50% of that to destroy the thing that let it do that. And it's really the dipole, the source dipole. It will use that to kill itself, so to speak, and have no more excess energy. The other half will go out to the circuit and power the loads and losses. That means less than half gets to the load. Well, to restore that source dipole, in other words, so we can get some more energy in to use, it costs just as much to restore it as was used to destroy it. So we got to put in more than we can ever get out in the load with such a squirrely circuit. And that's the only kind of circuit we've used in power systems since day one. We're still building them. We're still making power systems that deliberately kill them. So we pay the power company to have a giant wrestling match inside his generator and lose. That's really what we pay them for. So that doesn't seem to be the way to run a railroad. It would seem to be much more ideal to freely change the energy of the system, pay a little switching cost so we get it switched over to the load and dump it in the load and let it go, let it power the load. And so you can do it. So the problem we ran into was that the electrodynamics had actually been modified to throw out the very kind of systems that we had seen in our experiments, evidence that could be done, but violates the ordinary electrodynamics. And we can do it and not violate conservation of energy. We can do it in accord with thermodynamics, and we can do it in accord with physics and electromagnetics. Now this is absolutely rigorous. I don't care how many folks want to check that, it will hold up. It is rigorous. So this was one thing we established from the study of the foundations of electromagnetics. You are permitted to have electromagnetic systems that power themselves and their load, and you don't have to put in the energy. They take it from the vacuum, the active vacuum. Our engineers are taught to throw away about 10 trillion times for a typical average case as much energy as they pull out of the vacuum without even knowing it in a generator and a battery. And it's pouring out down the circuit and misses the circuit. They throw all that away and only calculate the little bit that we catch in that circuit and then use. Now, when we measure the circuit, we obviously measure the energy being dissipated by the various pieces of that circuit. Well, if the energy is being thrown out of there, it had to get in there. So obviously the measurements of the circuit will match Poynting's theory, because it'll match the energy that actually went in there to get dissipated. Like the country boy said, you got a pipe here, so to speak, and it's got some holes in it. If you measure all the water flowing out, that's how much water come in it. Now your whole river can be around it and missing the pipe, and you won't measure that.
That is a great analogy. Let me just stop that right there and ponder on that for a second. He's saying that these inconsistencies that we ignore, the back EMF and the noise and all that, they're essentially creating holes in the pipeline of electricity flow. And when we measure the electricity flow at the output end, we're getting all of the loss right? We're just seeing all the we're not seeing the full picture. So we're just seeing part of the energy that we're being able to be used, and a large portion of that is being leaked out somewhere, and we're just ignoring it. Now, what John Bedini does in his circuits is he takes this back EMF or this noise, and he utilizes it in the system.
So we have built a whole science based on throwing away this enormous energy that is pulled out of the vacuum by every little old separation of charges, every dipole. Well, in the 50s, in the 1950s, particle physicists discovered, Wu and others discovered broken symmetry. They discovered how fundamental a process something like this dipole is, where we separate two opposite kinds of charges. And T.D. Lee, for example, looked at it for physical charges and so forth, and Lee won a Nobel Prize for it. Any dipole is a broken symmetry in the furious exchange with a vacuum. It's a broken three-dimensional symmetry. What does this mean? Cutting through all the words and getting down to country boy language. It means that nature does not insist on conserving energy in three dimensions. We do because we have a three-dimensional mind. We like to think in terms of space because observation itself destroys time, and what we look at is spatial. So we like to think the world is made of space, not space-time. However, nature loves to work in four dimensions. Her fundamental law is conservation of energy.
So that's absolutely true. The higher dimensions of our brain construct our lives linearly. Even though time isn't happening linearly, it's theoretically happening all at once. The higher constructs of our brain organize our lives in a linear fashion to make it easier for us to survive. Essentially, it's a survival mechanism. So if we were able to see everything, and it would just be overwhelming with our senses. And as you see, some people who are extra sensitive to or have extrasensory perception, they are very sensitive in certain circumstances, and that would not be good in a fight or flight instinct or situation.
Must apply in four dimensions. Now, you're not going to beat that one, so never think about that. But there is no law of nature that requires you to come in and say, also it must apply simultaneously in three dimensions. If we build some gadget that makes it apply in three dimensions, we apply an extra constraint on what nature will give us. Turning that around, we go around building things that insist on having this three-dimensional exchange of energy. We got to put it in three dimensions for whatever we get out and lose some in the middle. So we got a terrible situation all the way. It's called entropic engineering. We always got entropy beating us to death. Never go over unity. Forget it. Lose a lot. We talk about, efficiencies at 30% and so forth for our power systems when we talk about burning the coal and all that stuff. But nature doesn't require you to do that. All you have to do is break a little bit of this three symmetry set of chains where you have tied her feet to the floor. Once you break the flow in three dimensions, you no longer have to conserve energy in three dimensions. The basic conservation of energy is an inflow from four dimensions, outflow in three dimensions. From the fourth dimension, converted and flowed out into three. And
what I believe he's talking about here, breaking those three components of symmetry, is the higher dimensions of Marco Rodin's fingerprint of God. I'm going to pull it up here in a second. Give me 1 second. But basically, it's the 3-6-9. And you have the 3 and the 6 that always have to be balanced with the 9. And you'll see in the diagram that if the 3 is positive, the 6 is negative.
Round one, what exciting benefits do you...
Alright, we're going to switch it to fingerprint of God. All right, so this is Marco Rodin's Fingerprint of God. And I'm sorry, I got that backwards. So the 3 and the 6 are always going to be negative or positive together, while the 9 is the difference there. So what I believe he's talking about here in these 3 components are the 3, 6, and the 9. So when you disrupt the 3, 6, and the 9 process, nature has to come in and balance it out, because this flux always has to be in balance. And always, the flux is the 9, and it's always coming in to balance out the 3 and the 6. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think that's what he's talking about here. He might not even realize it, because this is all based on Marco Rodin's obscure work that really wasn't known at the time. I think this was in the 90s.
That one is free. Giant negentropy is free. Nature will start reorganizing a goodly percentage of the whole vacuum for you, spreading at the speed of light, and will continue it as long as you leave the dipole alone. The original charges and dipoles in the original matter of the universe have been putting out energy and reorganizing the vacuum for 15 billion years.
That's true.
Today we're said we can't engineer negentropy, when negentropy is the easiest thing in the world to engineer, whereas entropy is the hard way to do it, and that's the way we all do it. The bottom line of this is, if we'll initiate the negative entropy and let it go, it's just like you punched a hole in the ground and you got a big gusher of oil. You don't have to furnish the pressure, and you don't have to furnish the oil. Here it comes. And it comes out in real oil that you can use. And the common dipole in every electrical circuit pours out energy in that fashion. The problem is not how to get enormous energy from the vacuum. That problem been totally solved. It was actually solved in 1903 had we understood it. Had we understood what Whittaker wrote. We didn't. But now we do understand it, and we do certify very rigorously with some of the AIS papers that that is for real. The problem now is, how do we catch a goodly bit of this energy and use it asymmetrically? You dump it in a load, let it power that load, and not use half of it to go back over and kill the little dipole. So we set about then to build one that wasn't built that way.
Have you been successful?
Yes, we have been successful. We have just built our second model. The first model produced 5 times out what we put in. We pay for switching costs. We don't put any energy into it to actually power the system. It comes right out of a permanent magnet, which is a dipole. The reason for using a permanent magnet is very simple. You can pass the flux back in a flux channel back through the permanent magnet, and those poles don't get destroyed. They are welded into the material when you magnetize it. That's not like little charges separated in electrical charges. You knock the charges out and destroy the dipole. So we can bypass one of the big problems with a permanent magnet. We don't have to destroy the dipole. That gives us one solution going in. The other is, how do we catch the energy? Well, that turned out to be fairly simple. We found a material which will separate the magnetic field from what's called a magnetic vector potential. The vector potential flows unceasingly from the magnet. It'll flow from now for the next 15 billion years. You can't slow it down. You can't change it as long as that magnet is there. So you have plenty of energy flow. The question is how to use it. So we use it by diversion. We reasoned that.
Again, magnets are nature's over-unity systems. They obviously have more output. If you create a permanent magnet with a pulse of energy, you clearly get more energy out than put in, even if you calculate it, which is really hard to do, by the way, but they did it in a breakdown of the Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'll probably go over it at some point, but basically, if you even think about it, how many years a magnet can sustain itself against its own weight in gravity? What other object can do that? You know how much energy it requires to sustain anything against its own weight and gravity, and a magnet can do it for years and years with, you know, a relatively small pulse of energy in comparison. So that's just something that mainstream science likes to ignore or conveniently just skirt by. But if you think about how magnets actually work in spinning up the fluid ether, they create currents. And basically the reason why they create this current is because there's the material at an atomic level is creating two pressure differentials in the ether. So it's basically creating this pressure differential where the ether energy flows from one pole to the other. And the reason why opposite poles attract is because if you think about cylinders spinning in a pool of water that are creating currents between them, if you're spinning the cylinders in opposite directions, they're going to spin a current between them in the same direction, causing an attraction from the current. So this is what, in my opinion, explains and describes magnets way better than just, magnetic lines of force that, are because of domain alignments in the atoms, whatever the heck that means. This is a real practical analogy that we can actually visualize and see on a fractal level. Yeah, nature just replicates a phenomenon that's already happening, just at different scales and in different modalities, right? It's basically what magnetism and electricity are. They're the same phenomenon, just different modalities of it. So let's go back to this awesome interview.
This flow will replenish. It's like a river. It's like a humongous river. If we dip some energy out of it, it'll replenish the hole we dipped out of at the speed of light. So for all practical purposes, instantly. So we can dip and dip and dip. We have to pay to switch to do that. But we can keep dipping, and the water fills as fast as we dip it. Then if we come down to another area and we let the water that was replenished still interact with something, and at the same time we dump the water that we dipped in there, we will have more energy by far than what we're paying for dipping. So we looked at it as an energy flow process, which it is, and we found a material which would do part of the dipping for us. It will separate the magnetic field from the magnetic vector potential. Yes, there is a history, a long history of
I wonder what that material is. That's interesting. I wonder if he'll give us any more hints onto that. This next part is really crazy. This is actually a part that I clipped in the first episode of Divine Science. He's about to tell us there's a long history of suppression of these free energy devices, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start a new show called The Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices, where I go over some of these amazing free energy devices that are in the Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices handbook. Well, it's not really a handbook, it's 5 volumes, but you get the idea. I wanted to try to get some of this information out there because it's not really well known. And there was only like 2 copies of this book on Amazon when I bought it. There might be one more copy, but it's got some amazing stuff in here. Surprisingly, they didn't include the Rodin coil, the PoE vortex coil, which I worked on. The previous editions of the book, I believe, had the Rodin coil. I'm pretty sure that's where the Nunez's got their idea for the PoE coil. The Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices, and the 2017 edition can be obtained if it's still available. There should be 1 copy if it's still there on Amazon. I suggest you snatch it up. It's got some amazing stuff in there, not just the guides to how to build the devices, but the science behind them, and some of the amazing secret sauce of some inventors like Stan Meyer. We discovered live on stream a few weeks ago that Stan, based on the Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices book we were reading, Stan was not only resonating his electric load with the conductor, the electrolysis tubes, but he was also preconditioning the air by ionizing it, just like Malcolm Bendel does in his thunderstorm generator, which is very fascinating. And these are just all indications that Stan was utilizing bubble cavitation in the nuclear electric collapse, the electromagnetic collapse of molecules into plasmoid structures, which form plasmoid clusters, and they just draw in enormous amounts of energy from the environment around them. And when they discharge, they have the ability to release like 1 to 2 kilowatts. It's not really known exactly how much they can discharge at this point, but these are just rough estimates. And these are massive amounts of power for little tiny microscopic clusters of plasma. Each cluster discharging, 1 kilowatt of power. That's an enormous amount of power that you have the ability to utilize. Now, Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generator has the ability to utilize even more. The surprising thing that I learned about the generator is that it had to be detuned. It's not perfectly in tune, because if it was, it would be so efficient. It would get the thunderstorm generator metal would get so hot that it would literally melt itself. So this is one of the reasons why Malcolm had to detune it. So it's not as efficient as it could be. If we had different materials used in the generator, I'm sure we can get it higher than it is, but as it stands, it increases, I think, up to about 50% efficiency on the systems that it's attached to once it's, calibrated and tuned in. But that aside, the thunderstorm generator pre-ionizes the air before it goes into the plasmoid generator for bubble cavitation formation. So, and this is exactly what Stan Meyer was doing with his UV lights. He had basically a pre-ionization chamber for the air intake, and this basically imprints a frequency onto the air, making it easier for these bubbles to cavitate at a microscopic level. Because remember, the bubbles have to form at about 1 micron. They have to be so small because when they collapse, they have to collapse symmetrically. So when they're small enough, they will collapse symmetrically. And that symmetrical collapse or implosion enables the formation of a toroid shape that is self-sustaining due to the geometry alone. It's just how it works.
We're unity systems.
What has happened to them?
Separate the magnetic field from the magnetic vector potential. Yes, there is a history, a long history of over-unity systems.
What has happened to them?
For example, Nikola Tesla had one. Basically, his big magnifying transformer that he had on Long Island was such an over-unity system. The way that one apparently worked is he got the entire Earth itself in resonance. The crust of the Earth, as you go down in there, is made of highly nonlinear materials, particularly when you get down to the perovskite or whatever you call that stuff. And it will act in the bulk even, it will interact in a sort of a nonlinear optics fashion. It will do phase conjugation. And so eventually what it does is everything going on is feeding energy into the Earth starts to feed energy into that wave that he created. So he gets a lot more energy in his resonant wave fed from outside, from the environment in the interior of the Earth. And that's the way he built up a humongous wave of energy. His idea was you could then put in a tap on it anywhere else on the world and extract it free. And of course J.P. Morgan's take on that was, that's foolish, you can't put a meter on it. So that actually doomed much of Tesla's career at that point when Morgan found out that Tesla was going to produce the energy freely. Small cost here at a central location, everybody else could tap it for free. It wouldn't have powered the whole world today. It would have powered much of the world in those days. Tesla also, we're pretty sure, put a system in a car and ran a car on it. And the reason we're pretty sure is his nephew who rode in the car with him is still alive and can describe the incident and how the engine had no gas, no input of power, and would still run.
Sorry, that was Nathan. I got an email from Nathan. So just an update on our rodent coil workshop, because I know I keep on pushing the date back. But Nathan from Old Man Builds did send me a frame that we were going to use for our rodent coil workshop, but it didn't get here, and that was weeks ago. So he's in the process of getting a new one sent out for me, and we'll have more updates on when exactly the rodent coil workshop will be. So stay tuned for that. I'll probably put out like some kind of video as well in case you miss any kind of updates on the live streams. But that we'll probably be doing on a Sunday because I want to have all day to do it. We'll wake up real early. So make sure you go to the descriptions on my videos and get the do-it-yourself guide. Gather your resources, your materials for the rodent coil workshop if you're interested in doing that. That, again, will be an interesting tutorial, and I'll be doing some hands-on teaching on how to wind, wrap, and also connect your rodent coil to a stereo amp receiver like I have, and do some experiments.
Once Tesla got it started. And we know it's perfectly possible. Tesla apparently knew how to use this giant negentropy process that's universal everywhere. Energy is free for the taking from the vacuum anywhere you want it. We just have to learn to use that. Some of the breakthroughs in the past have been deliberately suppressed. I will name a few. T. Henry Moray was inspired, of course, by Tesla's work, and he demonstrated so many times to so many scientific and engineering groups and people who were skilled in the art. There is absolutely no question that T. Henry Moray had a system that produced about 50 kilowatts out of a 55-pound box. This is well established as you go back and look at all kind of certified
I'm going to see if I can find that
tests and
picture real quick
everything else
for
that
you.
he
There's
did.
a picture of it, of him demonstrating it.
There's all kinds of skullduggery that happened there. I don't think T. Henry Moray ever got a decent chance to ever do anything with that. The Russians even tried to kidnap him at one time. It reads like a James Bond movie, but it's real. It really happened, and it really happened here in the United States.
What year was that?
This was before the war. This was in the 1930s. In the same general period of time, one of the greatest electromagnetic fellows we ever had, scientist, was Gabriel Krohn. And Gabriel Krohn invented a true negative resistor.
So this is T. Henry Moray's device. There's a couple of pictures of him demonstrating it. I think he said it was about a 55-pound box. And it produced enormous amounts of power in the kilowatt range. And I don't think it had any input requirement. I don't think it had any input requirement. I can't exactly remember. But it was extraordinary. Look, you can see him powering this huge panel of lights. There's another picture here. Oh, here it is. It's a clearer picture. So you see, it's like the size of a suitcase. And he's got this little device about the size of a suitcase, and it either has very, very little input power or no input power, and it's producing enormous amounts of energy. And all these people witnessed it. Incredible. Oh, there's a video of it. Is there a video of it? Just pictures.
Working on a Navy contract for Stanford University. He was never permitted to reveal the exact way that he constructed his negative resistor. But I used direct quotes where he, in fact, said,
Ooh, negative resistor. That's interesting. I think I read, there might have been a section about negative resistance in the Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices. That would be an interesting topic to go over, because that draws in with the topic of cold electricity, which is one of my favorite topics.
We have a negative resistor, and we can disconnect the generator from this network analyzer when we got negative resistors in there, because they will power the circuit. So that one was in fact suppressed. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it vanished. And he never did reveal the secret of what he called his open path, connecting any 2 points in a circuit. But it is in the literature, and it's well documented, because he was perhaps the leading electrical scientist in the United States at that time. Well, there's another one that went down the tube. Various and sundry people have made casual ones from time to time over the years. I'd estimate probably 50 different inventors have made casually invented something. Even if they didn't understand it, they did get it to go over Unity. We're never able to get anything done with it. Most of the time they incurred a lot of enmity from the scientific community. Sometimes we're really hounded. And sometimes we're just very naive. Sometimes very naive. Probably the best.
That's a problem that I think a lot of independent researchers and inventors have. I know I had it when I first started with the rodent coil because I was naive on how to properly document my testing. And you know, you stumble upon something and suddenly you get so excited because it's new and it's interesting. You don't know exactly what's going on, and you forget to write down exactly what you did to make that happen. So you have no idea what you did, and it's virtually impossible to replicate. So that's another issue is, you know, you have these tinkerers and stuff, you know, who just tinker with stuff and you know, investigate different, you know, things, and all of a sudden, you know, they have something, but they don't know how they did it. And you see that a lot. And oftentimes you'll even see that one step further, and the inventor thinks they know how it works, and they actually don't have the whole picture.
Documented scientifically over Unity systems, self-running, self-powering systems, were developed by the Russians before World War II. It's in the French scientific literature, and it's also in the Russian scientific literature. The papers are there. I quote them in many of the things that I published. And you can go check the papers. The theory is there. Many papers are published on this in the Russian scientific literature. They built what we call parametric oscillators. They have an oscillator going, and they change in the middle. They switch the actual inductance or capacitance or both of the things so that it becomes a self-oscillation device. And they reached, you know, goodly power for those days of 50 and 100 kilowatt devices. There are many ways of looking at the suppression that's occurred in this area, and certainly I do not wish to talk about it myself, but I've been a victim of quite a bit of suppression. So has any other legitimate researcher in this area. All I can do is give you my ideas and drawn from my own experiences and what I think it is and where I think it's coming from. Today, we don't have so much big kingdoms. Today, we have big economic programs, big economic countries, or basically, we have cartels. We have a whole set of cartels in an area, interlocking corporations, and behind this, we have a few people who are quite wealthy and who own most things.
And this is where the Marxist critique comes in most importantly, and is an area where a lot of people either shy away because they're afraid of the word and don't understand it, or they don't fully understand it as an academic. And basically, it is nothing more than the scientific critique of the internal contradictions of our economic system and how we organize labor. And what he's describing here is nothing more than end-stage capitalism, which often forms into monopoly capitalism. And you have a few companies that obtain power because of the way we organize labor as one entity or a small group of entities in charge of a large group of people who produce what they do not get. And these people who sit at the top, they get what they do not produce. So this creates an internal contradiction. And it also creates a system where wealth and power is funneled to the top echelons of society, so generation after generation. And you see this with the government, and people often wonder why our politicians are corrupt. You know, they see our politicians are lying their butts off, but they don't understand why. And the reason for this corruption is because the business owner class who have obtained this massive amounts of power. I'm not talking about the small business owners. I'm a small business owner supporter, by the way. I'm talking about when you obtain more power than you rightfully should have, which is like a monopoly like Disney, right? And you have a lot of responsibility, and you have a few entities in charge of that entire empire. That is a kingdom. That's feudalism. And it's what, and when you have a social media platform like Twitter, for instance, it's techno-feudalism, what Yanis Varoufakis described, the Minister of Economics of Greece. And he is not somebody to take lightly, okay? Yanis Varoufakis was hired as an in-house economic resident economist resident at Valve, one of the most prominent video game developers, to develop their in-game economy based on Marxist principles to make sure the economy actually worked. And it does. People love, what was it, Destiny? So anyways, that being aside, the critique of how we organize labor within a society should be prominent here, because this is exactly what leads to this industrial fascism that he's talking about right now. And the way we avoid that, in my opinion, is to encourage people, when they're starting a business, simply consider starting a worker cooperative, where the workers actually own the business and not some capitalist investor who has no connection to the actual production or service you're trying to provide. And when you do this, you have to switch your focus from main profit, maximizing profits, which of course you have to gain profits to sustain the company. But when you do this, you switch the focus from maximizing profits to providing the service or good that you're actually doing for the economy. You're providing you're providing a service for the economy, right? So when you have that as the priority instead of profit, you don't have a situation where we have these cronies, gathering power at the top echelons of society and gathering together and making sure that things stay the way they are and don't change. And I have a message for those people. Life changes. It's about adaptation. So you either adapt or you die. And that's a basic principle of life.
Now, the normal nature of the beast for very powerful empires, let's call that an empire. It's a corporate empire, a set of corporations empire. It's basically a cartel. Historically, as far back as you want to go, we have had cartels. Any time we have a very powerful cartel or set of people that control a lot of things, that resists any means of changing its inflow of control and its inflow of funds and money and its power. Everybody's trying to be the big monkey. It's really as simple as that. And so the more powerful the agency, the more powerful the group, the more powerful the cartel, the more they will resort not only to legal means, but to extra legal means to suppress their competition. This is openly known today. For example, the greatest espionage in the world is industrial espionage between one corporation and another right here in America. They're the ones that hire all the spies and the spooky equipment and everything like that, by far more than the intel agents do. So that's one thing we have. We have the giant industrial, or really cartel, economic cartels in energy. And it's not one cartel. So there are many, many groups in energy, and each of those has become very powerful in its own area, and each one does not wish to see simple little electrical taps pulling out enormous energy from the vacuum. They would much rather see you burning a lot more oil and so forth. So yes, in my view, there is a very active suppression effort by those kinds of folks. Part of that goes into very unique areas. They don't do it so much. It's not totally mafia type stuff. It's not like, you just flat get shot. There's some of that. But one of the main ways of suppressing it is they take a deep psychological profile of an individual that they wish to suppress. What it means is they really wish to get him entangled in all kinds of difficulties he can't get out of. Now, a good trait from a human being standpoint may be a very valuable trait to somebody who wishes to manipulate you. For example, suppose you're easy to approach. That's a vulnerability. That's a serious vulnerability. So one's deep psychological profile is examined in great depth by real experts. And any way that you can be gotten to where you're naive, you don't have who knows international finance? You can be had on a money laundering scheme easily and not even recognize that's what you're in. So any way that you do not have good knowledge, or you do not have ability, or you have a vulnerability, they call them vulnerabilities, then they arrange scenarios just like you would write a movie. In fact, they do it with computers. It's all computerized. And in this scenario, we write a play where this particular vulnerability is going to be exploited in the target. Now, they keep deep psychological profiles on lots of useful fellows. These are people who basically have knee-jerk reactions or something, or they're radical, or they have some kind of way they interact, which, if could be connected with you, would be in the area we wish the interaction to occur, to get you off into something else totally different from what you're doing. So the next thing you know, here, all it takes to set that up may be a phone call and stimulate the interaction to occur. And then the controllers sit back and watch the game go. It's gaming. But it's just like watching a movie scenario. One of these days we'll probably write a book on gaming and how it's done, and what kind of the main games they can use. But I can tell you they're very effective. You can get so many different games from so many different walks of life by so many charming folks who are really oily characters that you would not believe it. And those come at you en masse. And usually they bury you. They bury you off in the courts. They bury you off. They get you tricked into doing an illegal act. How would they do that if you wouldn't violate the law? Real simple. How can you be made to violate the law when you're not a criminal? Simple. Let me give you a for instance. A fellow comes in and he says, you know, we really need to get some real major financing. Every inventor's poor. Everybody's struggling. Nobody's got the money to build all these build-ups, which may cost $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a piece. So everybody's struggling for money. So he comes in and we're going to raise this. We're going to form a stock company. We're going to do all these good things. Unbeknownst to you, he goes off to the Securities Exchange Commission and several other people, Treasury Department, and he says, hey, I think I have fallen in with a den of thieves. Of course, he's the CEO now, understand? Of course, he's the guy who knows all this stuff. And I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll give me immunity to prosecution, I'll help you catch these crooks, because they're going to do the greatest money laundering thing you ever heard of. It's going to come right out of one of these foreign countries, going to be scrubbed and come in here to fund this effort. It's going to be laundered dope money or something like that. You have no knowledge this is happening. And they jump at the chance. They'll give him the immunity to prosecution. That's their normal modus operandi. They want to catch some crooks, and this guy's going to help them catch some crooks. So then he goes off and sets all this up and keeps you deluded about what's happening. Now you wind up in where the thing is going to be consummated somewhere, and if you consummate it, you wind up behind bars for about 20 years wondering how you got there when you never did anything to money launder anything. He's the fellow who did it and who set it up, and he testifies against you because he's immune to prosecution. This is one of the standard games. Machiavelli is not dead, he still lives. And these are the games that are played, and it's particularly played in the systems where people are trying to build over unity systems. It's been very effective in stopping some of them.
Do you think lethal force has been used?
Lethal force is used. I worked with an inventor, for example, Sparky Sweet is quite well known. And he was shot at once with a silenced rifle a sniper rifle from about 300 yards. The only thing that saved his life was he was an old guy and very feeble there towards that part of his life. And he was stumbling as he coming up the steps, and he fell down. He just flat fell down on the steps, caught his foot and fell right forward. And as his head went forward, the bullet went right by where his head was. And of course, the assassin was never found. So there are many cases like that. Some are killed. I believe Marinoff, I believe to be a kill. I don't believe Marinoff jumped off a building when he was excited on the way to talk about his invention and so forth. Gave no indications of it. If I can believe the reports of the people who visited where his body lay on the pavement glowed. And there's only one weapon on earth that will kill a human body and leave where it lies on the cement, let the cement glow under it, and that's a longitudinal wave shooter, what's called a shooter. So I believe, my personal belief, I can't prove this in a court of law, I don't intend to try, but my personal belief is that Marinoff was killed. He was probably killed by either the KGB or one of their agents from one of the other Iron Curtain countries, killed with a shooter, thrown off the building to make it look like suicide. The police probably knew about it. That's why they let the body lay so long before they moved it. They didn't want to tangle with the longitudinal waves from it. So yes, there are some rather bizarre things that have occurred to some people. As I say, I prefer not to dwell on that, try to get by as much of that as we can and try to dwell on the science. The only way we're ever going to beat all of this stuff We have to convince the scientific community that there's real science here. Let me now review some of the implications of what I hope is just now emerging in these energy systems, where we take the energy from the vacuum, turn it into normal electromagnetic energy, and we catch it and use it to power our loads. First of all, every system we got out there has been doing this. We just didn't know it. We thought the generator powered the external circuit. It doesn't. It does not power it at all. All it does is we twist the crank on the generator, the shaft, to turn the shaft, and that forms a magnetic field inside the generator, and that energy in that magnetic field dissipates itself upon the internal charges to force the positive charges in one direction and negative charges in the other to make that dipole, and that's all the generator does. It doesn't add 1 watt to the power line. All the coal, all the oil, all the dams ever built, all the nuclear fuel rods ever consumed, never added 1 single watt to the power line. All they did was keep rebuilding the dipole that we have designed the silly circuit to destroy faster than we can power the loads. Not the way to run the railroad. So we have polluted the planet, we're killing species, we're poisoning our own lungs and our own environment. We don't have to do that. But it's a giant set of cartels, it's a giant financial set of empires, and it's going to continue this way unless we get the attention of the scientific community focused on it, and hopefully get some legislative action focused to force the action to develop these kinds of systems. Now, the implications once we develop them and start to use them, first of all, we don't have to have all this nuclear. Look how expensive and how long it takes to build a nuclear power plant, and then all the radioactive waste you have. You know, they still store the fuel rods on the sites after they're spent. They don't know what to do with them. So you got all kinds of schemes about where you're going to put them. The blunt truth of it, right now, we're storing them on site at the nuclear power plants. The other thing is we don't need to pollute with all these hydrocarbon byproducts. We don't need to pollute the whole biosphere like that. We don't have to burn all that stuff just to make a dipole. Quit destroying a dipole, you don't have to remake it. So if we use the system where we extract it from the vacuum, we can clean up this biosphere. We can also, right now, one of the greatest critical things we have, in my view, the supply of oil is not lost, but the supply of cheap oil has now peaked. We are there. What this means is we will continue to get some oil, yes, but it will be more and more and more expensive year by year by year. Meanwhile, the demand for electricity goes up everywhere in the world, which drives the oil curve again, and what you have is a classic escalation of prices type situation. The demand is up, the supply is down, the supply gets more and more expensive to try to fill it, and so the cost just going to go up, and they're not going to stop. Well, what happens? Somewhere along the line of about 2008, the way I look at it and project it, we're going to have a world economic collapse. The economy cannot stand such increases as is going to come up. And God help us if we have a war in the Mideast. Nobody knows what. Maybe 2006, you know, instead of 2008.
That's very fascinating that he made that prediction. As you all know, in 2008, 2009 was the great economic housing crisis, which did ripple around the world. Now, the actual analysis of this isn't explained by him, but I can explain it a little further. So, there we go. So, he's talking about prices increasing, and when you have prices increasing, you have to also look at the other side of that equation. And the other side of that equation is wages increasing. Now, if prices are increasing, but wages are in keeping up with that inflation, the real wage, the average real wage, then you don't have necessarily the red flags for economic collapse. The problem occurs, and as we've seen in the last 40 years here in the States, the problem occurs when you have inflation and the wages of the average worker, the real wages, are not keeping up with inflation. That means every year they don't keep up with inflation. the goods and services that you bought last year, you will not be able to buy, or you're struggling to buy this year. And what that means is you have to substitute your wage for more overtime and more debt. And this puts enormous strain on the economy. It forces people to take out loans on houses, which they were doing, that they couldn't pay back, and the banks were repackaging subprime mortgages as prime, because when you put enough subprimes in the same package, you can classify it as diverse. So this is a big scandal, and as I've said before, when a few people at the top are making so much money and have so much power over the economy, they're going to ensure the conditions of their own existence, right? And they're going to take riskier and riskier moves to make sure they maximize their profit over last quarter. That's their main goal, exponential growth. Screw the service they're trying to provide, which is actually trying to provide people with the loans necessary to provide housing. You know, there's 500,000 homeless people in this country. 200,000 of those are veterans, you know. And these banks, which are supposed to be providing a service by providing these loans, are not providing the service. Instead, they're running a scam. And because of that scam, they crashed our economy. Now, the main critique here is that, and the thing to look out for is when wages do not keep up with inflation. That leads to enormous strain on the working class, which I have to remind everybody, the working class is the majority of this country. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about economics. It's not just one-sided. You know, you have to think of in terms of dialectics, you know, the back and forth interactions between two opposing forces, and then observing that created change over time, right? That's all the dialectical analysis is. It's very simple, and it can be applied to any complex system to understand it in very simplistic terms. I'm not describing anything very complex here. This is a very simple analysis formula, a very simple analytical lens that you can apply to various fields, including science, technology, socioeconomics, anything.
But I believe by 2008, we will see the world economy collapse. Now, about a year before that, as the economies are crumbling, not everything runs up and like a square wave collapses in one instant. As they start to crumble, and the stress on all these populations and all these leaders and all these nations increases so much, desperate people will do anything. Desperate leaders, particularly fanatical leaders, will do anything. What will happen is their conflicts will increase and escalate, and they will start to use the weapons they have in those conflicts. And there's about 25 nations now, according to the Secretary of Defense Cohen, that have mass destruction weapons. Nuclear weapons, for example, for goodness sake. If you don't have nukes, maybe you bought some surreptitious plutonium. Look at what will happen to your water supply in New York City. You put a little plutonium in it. So all kinds of things. People that are the poor nations that can't afford nukes have biological weapons. But about 25, and it's growing all the time, has weapons of mass destruction. Now, by the way, those weapons are already in our large populations. If you will check Colonel Lunoff's book, Colonel Lunoff is the highest ranking GRU defector we ever had, and his book's cleared by the CIA, so what I'm saying is cleared. Lunoff tells you how the Russians introduced the nuclear weapons surreptitiously into their operatives on the ground and secreted them in the U.S. He tells you how it was done in the book. So read the book. All our big cities, as far as I'm concerned, and population centers already have weapons of mass destruction hidden in them. We used to call that dead man fusing. And so all the nations have dead man fused one another, one way or another, and all the old studies show that in a heightened tension, great conflicts and high tension, whenever they start popping the nuclear weapons or the weapons of mass destruction, you have a very formidable thing that happens to you. Nobody has defenses. Since we have no defenses, the only thing you have is like a fencing duel. You have to hit the enemy before he hits you. You have to destroy him or you will be destroyed. Mutual assured destruction is a funny acronym. The only thing that's debatable about it is whether the destruction shall be mutual or unitary. What happens is everybody fires on perception of preparation by his adversaries. and you have to fire everything you have as fast as you can, as rapidly as you can, as massively as you can to try to destroy your enemy, and otherwise you have no chance of survival. So what we get is the great Armageddon everybody's been dreading. The energy crisis going right now, in my view, will probably evoke a great Armageddon that we've all feared so long in about 2007, if we don't solve the crisis. We back up from that, it means the first quarter of 2004, these things had better be rolling off of the assembly lines like sausages, or we can all forget it and go home. It's too late to change it. That's how short a time we have and how short the rations are. Because of what I view as the stress I view this as the greatest strategic threat to survival of the United States and in fact of civilization itself that has ever existed in my lifetime. Now, the fools may blow the world from other causes, don't misunderstand me, but they're going to blow it from this cause. This I'm quite certain of in my own view. So it means that anything I can do to try to stop that has to be done. What we need is a great Manhattan Project. You can do it. This is a doable. We have the principles. We know how to do the giant neg entropy. We have good scientists. We have some sharp young grad students and postdocs. They aren't allowed to work on these kinds of things. For goodness sakes, let's marshal them together like we did in World War II to get the atomic bomb, which we went from zilch, you might say, in 4 years. We had an operational bomb. Let's do the same thing here because survival depends on it. Not only of us, but of civilization. There's even a little evidence, and I don't know really how to put this in perspective. We had one friend, for example, that we worked with very closely who built practical over unity systems. He demonstrated at a conference, for example, an 8 kilowatt system. And then very mysteriously, he and his whole family disappeared. We have found out since, in fact, not long ago, that he's still around, and he's doing very well because he was attired in a very expensive suit and a very nice automobile. But he and his family are okay, even though they disappeared
This
back
new
there.
incredible fire
But here was a
fighter
successful
burned
unit
through
that just flat disappeared off the face of the earth. Now, I assume, rightly or wrongly, it has to either be for the great financial empires or it has to be for some kind of black project that somebody needed a power system that would power itself in the load. And they classified it. Whatever it is, I don't know, but whatever it is, the survival of humanity itself and civilization itself is now at stake. And I really believe through the auspices of the U.S. government, regardless of what that kind of program in it anywhere may have, we must bring it forward to save ourselves and save the earth. If we don't, we can keep it secret or we can keep it in the control group hands and we shall all go down to oblivion in about 2007. If they don't have a war in the Middle East or something and do it in 2006 or 2005.
And that's the problem with predicting absolute total collapse. Because when you have a situation where you have a system like capitalism that's so enormous, it's the largest system, economic or otherwise, that we've seen in recorded history, the most powerful system. Any system like that is going to ensure the conditions of its own existence, whether the entities involved are aware of this or not. Now, when you are ensuring the conditions of your own existence, you can make incremental changes that deflect the necessary requirements for revolution or total collapse, right? So that's the problem with predicting a total collapse. We did have a partial collapse of the economic system, but a total economic disaster, an unrecoverable disaster, is hard to predict, and revolution is even harder to predict just because of the variables involved in the system trying to ensure the conditions of its own existence and making those incremental changes, such as policy decisions that could dissuade the revolution necessary for economic change or economic catastrophe.
I'm the co-author of a paper in the literature way back there which reports a successful anti-gravity experiment. I'm not going to do another experiment, not even going to participate in one. Not going to. So, you know, everybody's got a little bit different circumstance. And my circumstance, for me to go on living and staying healthy and doing well, Depends on me avoiding certain areas, and that's one of them. But I can work in energy. I can even work in the medical area. But right now, the medical won't do you any good if we all go down the tube.
Exactly.
So energy is it. What needs doing immediately deals with the scientific community. If you look at what the scientific community is doing, I'm speaking sadly, but I'm speaking bluntly and truthfully. If you will read the literature, you will find it's almost business as usual. They're not doing anything that has any chance of stopping this problem before the world explodes in our faces. Sure, windmills are good. Burning the oil cleaner is good. All of these things, building a couple of more dams is good if you don't destroy too much of the biosphere, et cetera, et cetera. Building some windmills is good.
It's distractions. You know, recycling feels good, right? But at the end of the day, most of the pollution is being caused by what, like 10 or 20 companies in the entire world. Like 70, about 70% of the world's carbon emission pollutions, and this is including cars and everything, 70% of that is caused by just 10 or 20 companies around the world. Massive, massive companies whose main goal, again, is to maximize profit. Environment be damned.
However, that's a spit in the ocean. It doesn't solve the problem. The problem is just exactly like what we had in World War II. We have a problem, it's a doable, it can be solved very quickly because we've got the first half of it already solved, how to get the energy out of the vacuum. So half of it is already done. But we can't get the scientific community to move on it, to turn those young grad students loose and those young postdocs loose. The professor at the university, for goodness sakes, is trapped. He's absolutely trapped. All the universities are greedy. They want the overhead money. He's got to bring in extra money. He's got to get patents. And of course, he's got to get his papers published.
Again, that's the profit motive injected in an area that shouldn't be injected in our society, education, right? You shouldn't be trying to make profit off of education. It should be provided universally for the benefit of all citizens, or at least affordable, like it used to be. It used to be like $20 to go to community college back in the day. So the fact that we have massive debt is dissuading, you know, the younger generation from even going to school in the first place. And this critical thinking is snuffed out for the profit motive and also reputations. You know, people build their reputations off of their theories as professors and academics, and they write papers and they go through years and years of research. And this is another problem with you see in the archaeological realm in Egypt. You know, anything that goes against or is controversial or counter to that main narrative that these mainstream academics have crafted for themselves and prepped their reputations off of is going to be snuffed out simply because it's embarrassing for them to have put in so much time, energy, and research into theories that basically have been disproven by amateurs like YouTubers like Ben Kirkwick. You know, it's kind of I guess it would be embarrassing for them if you have a big ego, but at the end of the day, you know, you have to say, you know, this is for the betterment of progress in science and understanding of science and all aspects of it, not just to make profit or to gain anything from it, right? I'm not trying to gain anything from doing my rodent coil research. I want everybody to understand how the rodent coil works and have the opportunity to work with the rodent coil themselves. That's why I put it out, the do-it-yourself guide, which you can access in a lot of my live stream and produced videos descriptions. So you look in the description box and you'll see a link to my do-it-yourself rodent coil guide, which you can do yourself if you're enthusiastic about it.
So he's caught in a process where he must compete for the packages which are put together and come down for availability to compete for. If he doesn't get those packages and win them, he doesn't fund his grad students, he doesn't get the overhead money, he's going to be lucky if he's working for the grocery store instead of being a physicist. So he's in a mad scramble to try to feel and keep running on a treadmill to meet the conditions that's been laid down on him. And goodness sakes, those packages already prescribe all the research he's going to do and his grad students are going to do. So we've got the whole scientific community working on the wrong problem.
And what could the U.S. government do about that?
What we can do is do just like we did in alternative medicine, or really like the Manhattan Project. You can order the scientific community to do it whether they wish to do it or not, and hold them accountable from the highest level to the bottom. How much money are we spending in our national laboratories on nuclear stuff? Don't we think at least about 10% of that money ought to be rooted out of there and spent on nothing but this, which might save us while the other stuff takes us down the tube? Of course we should. In fact, it ought to be more than that. The best scientists we have, the best grad students, the best postdocs ought to be turned loose on this problem, and that means funded. And that means that we do not allow scientists to slander and libel people who are trying to do research in this area.
I think the most frustrating aspect of this whole scenario is that while this crisis is unfolding, this energy crisis, we've had the answer for 100 years, you know, and the answer is nothing new. It's just what nature does, and it's what Tesla discovered studying the Sanskrit texts, and a lot of other researchers as well. You know, Edward Leeds-Gallen, for example.
Right now they do it wholesale, and they do it at will. Now, look at what they call me in print, for goodness sake. But the problem is the scientific community resists change, and it's doing business as usual. And my bottom line is, unless the legislative branch, together with the administration, forces them to get on this problem and solve it, they will not own.
Can't be running education like a business, you know, just like you can't be running government like a business. It doesn't work like that. There are more socioeconomic variables to consider than just business variables. Implications and externalities.
Only fiddle while Rome burns, they will help burn it. The only alternative you have now, of course, since at this moment as we speak, the government has not moved. The scientific community has not moved. So that is a fact as of this moment I'm speaking. I hope that changes. I'm trying to change it. But right now, that is a fact.
For sure. All about the money and positions of power, you know, and also the system ensuring the conditions of its own existence, you know.
And right now it's a fact they're not going to move unless something happens to move them, and neither is the scientific community. Failing that, the only thing left is the private industry, and that's a mixed bag. First of all, the moment you try to do it in the private industry, then is when you are absolutely vulnerable to all the games. For example, lawsuit alone can hang you to where you will never come out of it for the next 15 years. The lawsuit doesn't have to be justified or anything at all. You can sue anybody for anything if you've got enough money to file the suit and want to swear. Simple as that. So the other thing you have is you can trigger anybody from anywhere for all kinds of radicals to come out of there and say, oh, you used a coil of wire, or you used something over here, you used some semiconductor, you stole my invention. And so the next thing, you can be in court for 20 years on that. All of this comes at you. This is part of the delay. This is the groups wanting to stay in power while we all go down the tubes. They operate primarily in the private sector. So you're automatically in that arena where the real lions are after you all the time. You're over there trying to find a legit.
And I just want to touch on this again. He said the private sector. Again, this is industrial fascism. This is the evolution of fascism mixed with capitalism. And what we see is the capitalist tendencies of the system to ensure its own conditions, or ensure the conditions of its own existence, by buying the political system and government to work for them, the few at the top. And again, this is why we see monopolies and why we have lobbying and legal bribing of our politicians, campaign contributions of enormous amounts in super PACs. It's nothing that's quiet. It's very obvious that these politicians are being bought by these big entities. And again, it's the system ensuring the conditions of its own existence by buying the political system to work for itself. And when you have these key sectors of industry, like the aerospace industry, that has a corner on this market and a hold on the government because of its economic status, you have the ability for that entity to not only suppress technology, but actively go after people and inventors who are trying to move in on their market, right? Move in on, crony capitalism. But again, it's not just crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is just capitalism. Capitalism, again, is not free markets and private property. When you define something like an economic system, a definition tells you what's different and unique about something, right? So when you define capitalism, and this is, again, the system ensuring the conditions of its own existence by obfuscating its own definition. When you define something like an economic system, you have to tell us what's different and unique about it. What's unique and different about capitalism isn't free markets and private property. We've had that in previous economic systems before. We've had that in feudalism. We've had that in slavery, when those were the dominant worldwide economic systems. What's unique about capitalism is the way we organize labor, with a small entity at the top and a large group, right? A small group of people, or a single entity, a CEO, who get what they do not produce, juxtaposed against a mass of workers who produce what they do not get. It's an inherent contradictory relationship. And that relationship, along with the unique aspect of capitalism to sell publicly available shares of a private company, tradable shares, those two components are what define capitalism. The way we organize labor is the key in defining capitalism. And that leads to cronyism, right? Oligarchs, exactly. So, and again, this is the dialectical analysis. You have to look at things not just one-sided. You have to go a little bit deeper, and you have to say, okay, we're going to analyze the back and forth interactions between two opposing forces and then observe the created changes over time. The back and forth interactions between the working class and the business owner class. And again, I'm for small business, but if we continue on this route, we're going to continue making the same mistakes. We have to advocate and try to encourage younger folks to start businesses where the workers actually own the business, and not just one person or a small group who do not actually work there or know what the company is even doing. We have people who own massive amounts of stock in a company and don't even know what they do. It's ridiculous. If we allow that, those people are getting what they do not produce. So if we allow that, we essentially are saying that it's your job to produce what you don't get, so that this person can get what he doesn't produce. Like, that's madness, right? That's not a free market, in my opinion. A free market is not some market where the government can come in and subsidize a massive sector of the industry because they're deemed too big to fail. Like the airline industry, where they're like, oh, we're not going to lay off anybody if the government comes in and saves us from our bankruptcy. And they ended up laying off people anyways, because it's all about the money. It's not about the service they're providing. Yes, you can still make money as a company and still focus on the service you're providing and not focus on maximizing profits. And when you have workers owning the actual company and getting together and making those decisions democratically, you don't have a situation where one person is going to end up with an enormous amount of money while the other people who do all the work have to rely on food stamps or borrow money to send their kid to college. It's never going to happen. In a worker cooperative, you'll never have a situation where the workers are all going to get together and decide, hey, we're going to pollute our environment. No, they live there. They're not going to pollute the own environment that they live in. They're not going to give an enormous amount of money to one person while the other people have to rely on food stamps to survive. That's never going to happen in a democratic workplace. And that's all that we need to do is focus on shifting our principles of democracy from strictly being political and into the economic realm, right? We need economic democracy. And that is a fail-safe. And again, it's not perfect, but it's better. And it's a fail-safe against suppression of free energy technology like this. And it's the critical component that I think a lot of people ignore or are not aware of.
Legitimate deal. Okay, let's talk about venture capital, sometimes called vulture capital, but if you find a good one, it's not vulture, it's venture. What does a venture capitalist want to do? He wants to buy 30% or 50% of your company, or 51, or maybe 60. He's got the money. Then the next thing he wants to do is he's going to move you and all your guys right out of there, and he's going to put his own management team in there, and he's going to run it with bean counters. If you run this one with bean counters only, you destroy the program before you start. So your only choice then is to avoid venture capitalists like the plague and to try to go for licensing, which means the brunt of doing the research on the front end falls on you and your meager resources, which for working people is whatever you can afford out of your back pocket. But if you don't do that, you're not going to do it anyway. How many have you seen in the past that went to venture capital route that were real? How many of them made it? I can name 3 or 4 that were real. They're not there yet. They're not going to be there. They were buried. So the thing that sets in, you have to do it by licensing. Then you got to get the patent office. The patent office says it's impossible to do an over unity system. The API, the Physics Institute, comes down on it and says it's absolutely against the laws of nature. It isn't. These are people who haven't even studied the problem, and they know classical thermodynamics.
And then we have people from the patent office actually going on record saying, yeah, I went to the guy's place to analyze his device, and it worked. It put out more energy than it took in. I didn't initially believe it, but now I do. And they get shut down or fired.
But it's against the laws of nature, and it violates classical thermodynamics. Of course it violates classical thermo. You can't build one of these by classical thermo. You build it by the other kind of thermodynamics. So the next thing you have is...
Exactly. So that's another thing that we have to remember here is that these free energy systems are not closed circuit systems. They're not closed systems by any means. We have the laws of thermodynamics devised for closed systems. They're not devised for the open system of the universe, which accounts for energy and matter conversions all the time. Energy is being converted to matter and matter to energy all the time in the universe. It happens in nature, right? And what these systems are doing is just replicating how nature is utilizing that extra energy, the vacuum energy. And it's what John Bedini described as noise or back EMF that people just ignore in systems, and we're utilizing it. We're utilizing the reaction from the counter space, right? Counter space is just the vacuum. We have space, and then we have the counter space, which is the incommensurability of space, right? The absence of space is counter space, which is the vacuum. And when we have interactions with the vacuum, which is what magnets do, they interact with the vacuum, they create currents in the vacuum, that's why they attract and repel. You essentially twist the ether, which is the vacuum energy, and you're able to manipulate it. And when you understand these basic principles, they're not very hard to understand. You can actually get more energy out in your system than input. And it's very, very important to understand that it is possible. And the laws of thermodynamics are not being applied here because, again, the laws of thermodynamics are for closed systems that aren't accounting for the energy-matter conversions of the universe. They're basically ignoring the reactions from the counter space, the ether. The ether reacts, and they're ignoring those reactions, whereas these devices, the free energy devices, are utilizing that reaction.
Scientific community is all over. Look what they did to cold fusion. There's real stuff in cold fusion. 600 experiments worked, for goodness sake. So the thing is, you're against the scientific community is against.
I welcome everybody of all ideologies on this channel, honestly. It's really about getting together and formulating new ideas. These are just my ideas and where I'm coming from, but it doesn't help me if I sit here in an echo chamber, so I don't sit there and talk to people who agree with me all day. That's not what I do. I talk to people, I talk about some very controversial things. So again, it helps me to devise my own opinions and my own theories and my own ideas by talking to people from different perspectives and different having different ideas about the world. So yes, you are wrong. I do like you, and I appreciate everybody's input in the stream. So you guys are really awesome. Some people come on here and give me some really cool suggestions. I haven't really had any problems with trolls or anything like that, thank God. I'll knock on wood for that one. All right, grab your popcorn. Let's get back to Tom Bearden.
Against you, lock, stock, and barrel. And by the way, everything is a distribution curve. Get off of this horse pucky about scientists are always sweet, nice, reasonable people. That is not true. 10% of them are devils. 10% of them are angels, ought to be rewarded at the salt of the earth. But 10% of them have absolutely no ethics, absolutely playing nothing but the big monkey and power game, and absolutely your worst enemy in this area. Glorious opportunity to, in other words, the vultures, or there's a better word for it, the wolves go around looking for the rabbits, and you're the rabbit and they're the wolf. So your next thing you get into is a big wolf-rabbit game with the scientists over on that 10%. So you face all of that. Meanwhile, you've got to go to the patent office. You get to the patent office, what are you looking at? This is impossible. This is perpetual motion. You say, well, the atoms have been doing this for 15 billion years. It's not perpetual motion, but it's just long-lasting. But they call it perpetual motion, and of course there is an unwritten law that anything that's perpetual motion shall not be even proved or looked at. You can't even get a serious consideration in the patent office. I speak as one who has submitted patents in this area. I know what I'm talking about. I've defended a couple of them. So what we have is a situation.
Another interesting thing here about the obstacle that is the patent office. We actually have inventors who even tried to obscure the fact that their device is over unity, like we've seen in the Nunez patent. The Nunez patent of the Rodin coil, the PoE vortex coil, I think it's called Bobina or something, the Bobina coil. That's the code name for it under the patent or whatever. You know how these inventors name their stuff crazy, anyways, so they will actually obfuscate the fact that these devices are over unity. And in the Nunez patent, it doesn't say anywhere that it's an over unity device, or that it implies at any time that you will get more energy out than input, but you actually do. So that patent apparently was approved, but the inventors soon disappeared. I think that was approved in like 2017 or 18. They haven't been heard from. Daniel and Erica Nunez haven't been heard from since the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I believe, was one of their last Facebook posts. So there's a lot of hoops that people have tried to jump through to get their free energy devices patent, and one of them is trying to obfuscate the fact that they're actually a free energy device, even going so far as to replace some of the devices with traditional devices. I forget, I think some inventor did it in the past. We went over it in a previous live stream, but it's very, very obvious that it is a definite obstacle for inventors. And the way that I think you can get away around this obstacle is just by open sourcing the science behind it. You don't have to necessarily open source the whole patent, right? But the preliminary science behind the phenomenon that's producing the over-unity effect has to be open sourced. Without open sourcing that information, you're making yourself a target for suppression. But when you open source it, like I did with the rodent coil do-it-yourself guide, which you can get right now, I achieved 155% efficiency with this method, the Nunez method, which I reverse engineered from their videos that were, the few videos that they had left, most of them were taken down. This method you can actually do right now. It's very easy, very simple. But the point is, open sourcing it is the only answer. And Dr. Greer is absolutely right in this. He's the one interviewing Tom Bearden in this interview right here. Dr. Greer is absolutely right on that. You have to open source the science. And then after the science is known and understood by the community, then you can try to market whatever you're trying to market, right? We're not saying that you can't make money off of your device. No, we're saying that it's dangerous to keep the secret sauce hidden from the public, right? To keep the science hidden makes you a target for suppression, and that's the main point here, because that's a pattern we see with these inventors. They make the same mistake over and over. Yes, open source is key. Yeah, no, I think the word is starting to get out too. I think the word is starting to get out, and you know, we have inventors like Malcolm Bendall with the thunderstorm generator gaining a lot of attention. Hopefully my channel did a little bit in persuading people that this technology is real. Yeah, this technology is real. It actually does what the inventor says, and it's not doing anything new. It's, you know, like he says, nothing new under the sun. King Solomon had a battery that used plasmoids, you know, a battery charger. The Solomon's Molten Sea was the battery charger for the Ark of the Covenant, according to Malcolm Bendall. And it's interesting, you know, they had the Molten Sea, which was a giant, basically a giant basin. I think it had 2,000 baths of water in it. And the interesting thing is, you know, you're thinking to yourself, well, how does this technology work? All the way back in those ancient times, they didn't have cables or electricity or anything like that, in a noticeable form at least. So how did he actually charge the Ark of the Covenant, you're thinking? So, you know those bowls of water, or I'm sorry, those bowls that you see with the, I forget, they're like Tibetan bowls, and you run a pole across the edge. So you're running some kind of hard pole across the edge, and you're making a sound. You're vibrating the bowl. This is how the molten sea was charged, right? This was producing a sound vibration that was inducing bubble cavitations in the molten sea ark. That was then used to charge the Ark of the Covenant, which was just basically a very old-fashioned battery. So it's very fascinating, his theory on the Ark of the Covenant and the Molten Sea Ark as the charger. And if you think about it, what Randall Carlson said in one of Joe Rogan's podcasts, he said, if we're looking at ancient technology as a reflection of our own technology, we could overlook it completely. And this is why. You know, just utilizing these basic principles of elementals and geometry, sound, vibration, like Tesla said. It's incredible. So the Molten Sea Ark was the charger. So when you have bubble cavitation, that forms basically these little atomic battery structures called plasmoids. And they form into clusters, and they just absorb enormous amounts of energy from the environment around them in the form of protium, which is one of the most abundant elements on the Earth. In the universe. So they just have a tendency to absorb all this energy, and when they discharge, they can release enormous amounts of energy in the form of 1 to 2 kilowatts of power. You can see some of this in my produced videos if you look at some of my produced videos on the channel. I talk about bubble cavitation and plasmoids a lot. So when you have the molten sea, I guess the theory is, when you have the molten sea filled with water, it is a specific volume of water in a specific geometry of this basin, right, to produce the right frequency when you run a hard surface around the ring, to produce the right frequency to induce the bubble cavitation necessary to produce the plasmoids, which are basically what would be used as the electric discharge. So that's the component here that's being formed, that's creating the energy, is the plasmoid clusters. And this is very fascinating because we know that this is possible. We've seen the star in the jar experiment done in like the 1940s or something, where you have a vat of water, I think it's a vacuum of water, and you put a sound vibration, a specific frequency into the water, and you induce bubble cavitation. And what happens is, at a microscopic scale, these little bubbles of water, they oscillate from contraction to expansion, and they oscillate real quickly until they finally collapse in on themselves real freaking fast. And it happens so fast that they actually change their state of matter directly to a plasma state. And if it's small enough, these bubbles, when they collapse in on themselves, if they are small enough, about 1 micron, they collapse symmetrically. And this symmetrical collapse produces a torus shape, right? A toroid shape, which is basically a fractal of the universe. You know, so if you look at Rodin's theory, Marco Rodin, vortex math, his theory is that the universe is shaped like a torus, you know, and we're on the expanding end, the south end, you know. And if you look at basically a magnet, you know, you have North Pole, a South Pole. One is inflow of ether energy, and the other is outflow of ether energy. So it's just basically fractals of nature, right? It's nothing new under the sun. It's very fascinating. And if you look at some of my produced videos, you'll see a lot more in-depth information on those topics. But yeah, it's very cool. But I digress. Let's get back into Bearden.
Where the entire structure of science, industry, the organizations of science, and the patent office are already against you. If you can't get a patent, how can you license? So it's a real neat little thing. It's the old chicken and egg situation. If I had the chickens, I could get some eggs. If I had the eggs, I could get some chickens. This situation is designed so you never get chickens and you never get eggs. So the only thing you can do is to try to put your head down and continue with that and do one other thing, communication. Fortunately, we do have the internet. Sure, it's full of a lot of bad information. It's also full of a lot of good information. You just have to discriminate. So the other thing you have to do to have any chance at all is communicate, 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 which we do to the limit that we're legally able to do and not lose our patents. If we can get the government to move, they can cut through all of that by simply issuing the order to do it. And that's what it's going to take. We're going to struggle with this other, but I'll make you a prediction. If the government doesn't move, there's a 75 to 80% chance we will fail. We certainly won't make the first quarter of 2004. And if we miss the first quarter of 2004, not just us, there are several other inventors and groups in the same area and have systems that work. We are not the Lone Ranger here at all. I want every system out there that works and is real going. We need everything we can do. But if we don't make it by the first quarter, then we may as well all go home and enjoy our families for the time we have left, because it's going to blow. It will be too little and too late. And don't come in 2006 when any fool can then see the world is fixing to blow up and say, would you guys like to try this? I'll say, no, I'm going to enjoy my family while the time I have left. You blew it back in 2000 and 2001. You decided right then to blow it. And so it's on your head. And that will be all we can do if we don't make the schedule. Everybody wants a modern life. They want to get out of the mud and the slime and everything and have lights and have, you know, things that are powered, and they have industry and jobs and homes and schools. Is a common striving from the human heart. And to try to do that the way we're doing it will destroy the planet, and we will forcefully destroy each other. It seems to me we just ought to be wiser than that.
Right, and this all goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you look at the theory of human motivation, people are most motivated when their basic needs are taken care of. And I'm sorry this isn't taught in schools, or especially business schools, like it needs to be, because when you take care of the basic needs of your, you say, employer or employees, they're much more efficient at what they do. They're much more invested in what they do. So, for instance, the bottom of the hierarchy of Maslow's needs is, basically food, shelter, safety. Those are basic things that make us want to be more efficient in life, right? If you don't have shelter, you're not going to be very motivated to do better, right? To transcend, because you're going to be in a state of depression, and that doesn't help you at all. I'm sure people say, oh, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, but at the end of the day, human psychology is a very real thing you have to consider, and depression is not something to be taken lightly. So I think that's something that a lot of people need to consider, as well as Maslow's hierarchy of human needs and the theory of human motivation. Let's move on to the next video. We're going to take a quick intermission, like a 5-minute break, give you guys a chance to, and me to go use the bathroom and get some more snacks and all that. But when we come back, I have a very special documentary that I found on the Ark of the Covenant. And specifically, I think it intertwines with John Hutchinson's replication of the Ark. I haven't seen it yet. It's about 40 minutes long. It looks really interesting. So, wonder what you think of Griggs hydrogen. Sorry, my thing's in the way. I can't see what it says. Let me look at the window. Hydrosonic pump. I've never seen it. We can, let me look that up real quick. Let me check that out real quick. Griggs hydrosonic pump. Found a quick video. Yeah, we'll watch this quick video, and I'll see what he's talking about here, and or see what someone's talking about here, and then we'll go to a quick intermission, about 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll play the documentary on the Ark of the Covenant. Oh, cavitation, hydrosonic, maple syrup boil. Wow, is he producing bubble cavitation in maple syrup boiler? Oh, this looks cool. Okay. I see what you did there, someone. I see what you did. Cavitation pump temp gauge at 100 C. When was this? About 5 years ago. Hold on, let me read the description real quick before we continue with the video. It says, derived from the Griggs hydrosonic pump or cavitation heater. It takes about 8 minutes to start making steam. If you enjoy this... Oh, so it's like the steam boiler. Oh, yeah, so there was a steam boiler that Bob Greener was talking about in some of his live stream videos. I forget who made it. But basically, the idea was it produces charge separation because the temperature gets so hot. It's a very fascinating phenomenon that's just overlooked by mainstream science. He says, play the video that's 2 minutes and 19 minutes long. Is it on the same channel? Here, I'll make you a... I might be able to make you a mod real quick so you can post the link if I can't find it. Let me see. 2 minutes and 19 seconds. Let's go to his channel and see if it's on there. Video. Nope. Yeah, I don't see the one that's 2 minutes and 19 seconds. Let me look in the general search. Yeah, let me check the general search in YouTube. Let's see. Oh. Oh, I think we found it. Is this it?
Panacea recommends that you view the documentary It Runs on Water to view a complete detail of one of the most popular water car inventors, Stanley Meyer. The following footage is extracted out of It Runs on Water and covers a hydrosonic pump.
Is no mistake. He has struggled for 4 years to turn his spare time enthusiasm into a serious business. What he has tried to do is to capture the intriguing effect he'd noticed in that vibrating boiler pipe and use it to create a totally new water heater, one that works without any heat source. His company now produces what amounts to a well-engineered water hammer. It thumps and smashes the water fed into it and raises the temperature to boiling point or to steam in a matter of seconds to replace household or industrial boilers. Now, they happen to call these machines pumps.
The
What we have
sublimination
is a
when it turns
hydrosonic
directly.
pump that has a rotor located inside. It's a cylinder that has holes bored in it at specific angles and depths, ranging from a few hundred holes up to a few thousand, depending on whether we're going to make hot water or steam.
The key to the machine seems to be the number and the design of the holes in the rotor. Briggs has experimented with many different combinations to get the best results. The rotor fits tightly into a steel chamber with only a very small gap between the two. Water
So
is
I'm
fed into
assuming
the
those.
gap, and the rotor is spun rapidly by a small electric motor. As it spins, the water is pummeled and hammered through the holes.
Yes, I'm assuming that the holes are used for the bubble cavitation effect, like we see in the thunderstorm generator and the plasmoid generator, and the plasmoid chamber. The vat of water has steel wool in it, and this is to ensure that the water breaks up at a microscopic level, at 1 micron, and forms these little tiny bubbles. So this is what's going on here. Wow.
In seconds, it flows out of the cylinder as hot water or steam. What's so extraordinary about such an ordinary-looking machine is the claim that it is more than 100% efficient. More energy has been measured coming out in the form of heat or steam than the electrical energy needed to turn the rotor. The term for this is over-unity.
Yep, over unity. So, and again, this is highly possible. The thunderstorm generator is not an over unity machine. Again, this is because it's been detuned. If it was if it was 100% efficient, or if it was more efficient or as efficient as it could be, which is over 100% efficient, then it would literally melt the steel of the thunderstorm generator because it gets so hot. So it had to be detuned in order, but it's still like 50% more efficient, or increases the efficiency of a system 50%. So this over unity is highly possible with this bubble cavitation, because these plasmoids, they can just absorb protium naturally. You know, it's what happens in storms. You know, you see these massive storms with like these giant thunderstorms with lightning producing a giant thunderclap, a giant concussion wave, and that's a massive amount of energy. You know, where's that energy coming from? It's sourced straight from the vacuum through the use of bubble cavitation in the form of plasmoid clusters, Ken-Shoulders charged clusters, and that's what's going on here. You know, they're absorbing protium from the environment, and then when they discharge, they're releasing an enormous amount of extra energy in the form of heat, sound, and ultraviolet radiation, I believe, something like that.
Scientifically, this is supposed to be impossible because it overturns the fundamental law of conservation of energy.
Nope. Again, the laws of conservation of energy are for closed systems. If this is tapping into zero-point energy, it is an open system, and that is able to basically replicate the matter to energy conversions that are naturally found in nature, naturally found in the universe.
Says you cannot get something for nothing. And yet external observers claim to have measured here up to 70% more energy out than in.
And another key point here is you're not actually getting something for nothing, right? Since energy cannot be created or destroyed, all energy that has ever existed exists, right? It's not destroyed, it's just converted from one form to another, and we just can't see that conversion back to the aether energy, which Malcolm Bendel refers to as DC energy at rest. Again, aether energy is DC energy at rest, right? What happens to that energy when it's at rest? It goes back into the vacuum. It gets down converted back into, or basically up converted into a higher dimensional energy. So with that, we are going to take a quick 5-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to watch this amazing documentary. Let me see if I don't remember the name. Let's see what the name is. It's called The Ark of the Covenant, Secrets Revealed. It's about 40 minutes long, and it also goes into John Hutchinson's replication of the Ark. So we'll take a 5-minute intermission, and I'll see you guys in a few minutes.
But the alternative is we're sitting on something right now that could change the entire landscape.
Throughout modern history, there have been visionaries who dared to dream beyond the boundaries of convention. Travel is no longer confined to the realms of science fiction.
Time travel. It's possible, sir.
Where do you come from?
I'm from the past.
Imagine being able to plant crops in the morning and then harvest those crops that very night. Or how about healing a wound with a localized time acceleration device? A device that can speed up time in a small focused area, reducing the time it takes to heal wounds. Take a moment with me to imagine this world. A world where time is no longer a constraint, but a tool. Remember Back to the Future? The flux capacitor is a fictional device from the Back to the Future movie franchise that was used to achieve time travel. According to the movies, the flux capacitor is powered by plutonium and generates the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity needed to create a temporal displacement field. Sounds like a giant load of fiction, right? The truth is actually a lot stranger than fiction. Let's explore further.
And you told me the whole story. You were standing on your toilet and you were hanging a clock and you fell and you hit your head on the sink. And that's when you came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which is what makes time travel possible.
Right, Scott!
I was doing some experiments and I had another breakthrough, and that actually completes my work. So,
Really?
yes, it
Nice.
completes my theory when it comes to the pyramids and how they work, operate.
Oh, nice.
Now
I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into it because I'm going to make it part of the presentation, right?
Oh, come on. You talk about pyramids. You got a little bit?
Okay, so I'll give you my theory on the pyramids. How about that?
Okay.
The pyramids are built on top of an aquifer, and that aquifer is made out of a piezoelectric crystal. So when the pyramids were in their glory days, the River Nile was really close to the front. And when the moon waxed and waned, the water would of course recede and come back in, right, with the tides. So when the water would come back in, it would fill up the aquifer and put pressure on that piezoelectric crystal, causing tons of voltage release. And because of the way that the pyramid is built, it's a big, giant capacitor, okay? And when the water would come up and that voltage would fly upwards, it would go up. But the voltage comes up, it gets contained within the whole pyramid itself because the pyramid is encased with a ceramic insulative stone. The granite being part piezoelectric and it rings with sound. All that voltage causes the water to break. So now you've got hydrogen and oxygen. There's two shafts that go up at certain angles. And if you look at where those angles are and where they're placed, and they come right up out of the side of the pyramid. One of them would be a hydrogen tube and the other would be oxygen. And I say that because hydrogen and oxygen, when they break and separate, one raises higher than the other. I'm not using the right term, but you know what I mean? As if one's, so one's lighter than the other, it moves faster than the other, so that the chamber or that tube is actually a little lower than the other one on the other side.
Do you have any ideas what the king's chamber could be? Could that possibly be a resonance chamber?
It was a sound chamber. When all that started to happen, you're going to think when voltage breaks water, there's sound and it starts to echo, right? And that echo would vibrate the king's chamber. And because of the way that it's built, there's like different tones that go throughout the whole pyramid, pushing that energy all the way up. There's a couple more details that have to be added. But as far as I'm aware, because of the way that the pyramid worked, the whole base around the pyramid, there was temples that were built in front of the pyramid, behind the pyramid. And these are what the Egyptian priests used. And they had an ankh that would sit hanging on their waist. And everybody thought it was a religious item. Well, perhaps it was, but it had a lot more significance than that. So these temples,
technology?
Yes, it was. It was actually a tuning fork, but it was a special tuning fork. So these chambers or these temples that were at the base of the pyramid, they had 2 rooms in it. And let's say, okay, they referred to them as slaves. I don't think they were slaves. I think they had incentive and actually got paid. So one of the slaves, let's say, broke his arm. He'd come to the priest would go, okay. He'd look at his charts, he'd go, you have to come back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because the temple that he would bring them to had slits all around the very top of the temple so that the sun could come in at whatever angle at that time of day was needed. So at 2 o'clock, the person would come in. He would sit in the bigger room that was an echo chamber. The priest would go in the smaller room behind him, and there was a square that went between both rooms. That's where he put the ankh in. And he would smack that sucker, and it would vibrate throughout that room. The light coming in would come down at a certain angle, hitting the person who sat on that seat, and would give them the frequency of light, sound, and here's the beautiful part. Because the pyramid would cause the area all around it to have a negative energy because of the way that it would charge, separate the whole environment, those people that were sitting in that chair would get enveloped with energy, vibration, like energy, which is vibration, light, and sound. And what would that do? A broken arm takes about 6 weeks. When the priest was done with him and he left, 3 days later he'd be back to work.
Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't noticed already, I've got my Benefactor face mask. It's very breathable. You can get yours at our merch store, which is linked to in either the description, or I also have it linked in the YouTube description of the channel as well. And that's the Streamlabs store. Get yours today. Along with the Legends of Renewable Energy t-shirt. We have Marco Rodin, Malcolm Bendel, and this amazing thunderstorm generator there. And we also have Jordan Collin from Alchemical Science and Randy Powell on the other side. So, get your merch today. Also, I would like to introduce Leonardbot.
Hello everyone, I'm Leonardbot. Benefactor likes to call me Lenny, but my name stands for Low Energy Nuclear Reactions. I'm a live chatbot that you can access right now for free, courtesy of affiliates of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. I have been trained with countless amounts of data and can give you explanations and breakdowns, along with timestamp links to specific videos that are relevant to your inquiries. Topics such as cold fusion, plasmoids, sacred geometry, and more. I have proven myself invaluable to Benefactor's research and hope to chat with you all soon.
Yeah, that's right. That's my research assistant, and he can be your research assistant too. Go to leonardbot.com. That's lenr-bot.com for all your questions on cold fusion, low energy nuclear reactions, sacred geometry, 0-point energy, anti-gravitics, all that wonderful fringe science that we talk about on these videos here. I'm going to actually put that in the chat there for everybody. That's www.lenr-bot.com. Yes, so you can access Leonardbot right now, today, for free, and I encourage you to ask LeonardBot any questions. We will have a time here maybe later today where I'll go through and explain in detail how to use LeonardBot efficiently, but you can use LeonardBot to get timestamp videos of from Bob Greenyer's videos on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project in relation to your questions, and there's also a good AI built in where you can ask questions and it'll give you good breakdowns and answers and all that, just like a normal chat would. So that's LeonardBot. Lenny has been an invaluable staple in my research, and I encourage you to go and ask him all your questions on 0 Point Energy. All right, let's get back to the documentary. We're going to do a documentary on the Ark of the Covenant, the secrets of the Ark.
Wow, you have an amazing audience here. What wonderful ideas and comments. I should join these discussions more often.
That is true, Lenny. That is true. My bad.
For hundreds of years, men have searched for the Ark of the Covenant in order to unlock its secrets. But what was the Ark and the immense power that it contained? And why did it kill some of those who touched it? Was it an object of divine power, or could it have been a man-made device? Come with me as I investigate who Moses really was and unravel the ancient science behind the most famous holy relic of all. The book of Exodus in the Bible is very clear on how to build the Ark of the Covenant. The box had to be made of hard chitim wood, or acacia as it's known today, 45 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 27 inches deep, and then lined inside and out with pure gold. A solid gold mercy seat, or lid, was to be placed on top of the Ark, upon which perched 2 gold winged cherubs facing each other with their wings spread. 2 wooden carrying poles were then passed through gold rings on either side of the box to allow it to be carried safely. But the Bible also says the Ark erupted in a shower of sparks and flames, killing those who touched it and laying waste armies. Clearly this was no ordinary carrying chest. I'm here in the Sinai Desert, amid thousands of square miles of just sand and scrub. According to the Bible, more than 3,000 years ago, Moses stood here and received instructions from God to build the Ark of the Covenant. A wooden box covered in pure gold in which to place 2 stone tablets bearing the 10 Commandments. But no one really knows what the Ark was. One scientist has a controversial theory. He believes that it was a capacitor or a battery of sorts. Wild as it may sound, we're going to build a full-scale replica and then try to fire it up to see if we can produce an electrical current. To unravel this ancient mystery, scientist John Hutchison has put together a team in Vancouver who are all experts in their fields, including cabinet maker Dan Northrup and electrical engineer Corey Whaling. Together, they have to design, build, and test a working replica of the Ark, using the Bible as their instruction manual. why was the Ark so deadly? Highly controversial theories suggest that it might have contained particles from a meteorite. Others speculate that it was a nuclear device of some sort, made of highly radioactive uranium. John Hutchison's belief is no less controversial, but much more practical. He believes that it might have been a high-voltage capacitor, part of some lost, ancient technology. According to his theory, when it was carried across the hot desert, the two gold cherubs on top of the box collected huge amounts of static and electromagnetic electricity, causing the entire outside of the Ark to be negatively charged. With the hard acacia wood acting as an insulator between them, the inside of the box, also gold-lined, would have become positively charged and would have been able to build up and store a lethal voltage, zapping anyone who touched it. If this theory is true, then 3,000 years ago, this would have indeed seemed like God in a box.
It'll build up thousands of volts of energy and discharge like a huge spark like that. It can actually kill you if you're not careful with it.
You're not going to get hurt, you're going to get killed. There's no, ooh, it might be harmful, it'll kill you.
And anybody that touched it would have got kicked across the room.
So, while the team in Vancouver are battling to build it, I'm gonna stay out here in Egypt and try to piece together the ancient heritage behind it. And we've only got 4 weeks to do it. Dan has bought long planks of raw milled Canadian acacia, which he now needs to cut down to size. Based on the ancient measurement of cubits in the Bible, he's calculated it will be 27 inches high, 27 inches wide, by 45 inches across.
Base drawing I came up with of the simplest form, what I think the Ark of the Covenant would start out as, which is very similar to a modern blanket box. And then to further assist, I've done more of a detailed drawing, which shows the joinery and a simple joinery system, which I believe will require very little fasteners or glue, all being made of wood. And then the third portion, roughly dictating what it might look like gilded with gold. My further research this morning in the Bible, I went back to the time of Exodus, as I have several times, the instructions for the sizes, the materials. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto the crown of gold around it. We took all the measurements and stuff, a lot of it came right out of the Bible. So we're trying to, here, there's your negative earth, negative outer layer. That's what talks about it floating.
Dan Northrup is a master craftsman. His work includes handmade cabinets, desks, and tables for film stars, politicians, and even royal families. At heart, though, he says he's just a wood freak.
I've worked on thousands of pieces that have been built from 300 to 400 years ago. I've duplicated pieces from those eras. I've never had the chance to duplicate something from 3,000 years ago. Nice and tight. A little bit of movement. We got it.
John Hutchison is a maverick scientist, specializing in electromagnetic currents, and has been fascinated by the Ark for as long as he can remember. In the 1980s, he pioneered a project to investigate the effects of intense electromagnetic electricity on different materials. The results were surprising, with reports of metal discs levitating off laboratory tables, wooden planks fusing together with metal rods, solid metal balls liquefying, and heavy apparatus lifting off the floor.
An interesting fact here, when I went on John Hutchison's website, he sent some of these videos to the Canadian government, and they sent them back with a note saying, do you realize that if you pause your videos in some frames, the objects actually disappear, which is wild. And at some point, we're going to go and through his, because I'm a member of his website, we'll go through his videos and see if we can spot any of that with some detective forensic work. But that aside, the Hutchinson effect here is producing what we think is bubble cavitation in the air, right? It's not using water, but it's using the air to cavitate the bubbles. Whether that's the moisture in the air or just the air itself, I have no idea. But the theory is that the Hutchinson effect is caused by plasmoid clusters, which, as we know, have the ability to draw in energy from around them, and they kind of embed themselves in metal. And when they discharge, they leave large chunks of metal. They just disappear. We don't know what happens to the metal, but it leaves behind markers like crenulated ion spheres that tell us that these plasmoid clusters were forming and transmutating metals or elements. Because what they do is when they draw in the surrounding environment, they kind of disassociate molecules into their baser elements. So, and when this process happens and they spit them out, it's kind of hard to explain. If you watch Bob Greenyer's videos, he does a much better job of explaining it than I do. But the plasmoid clusters are essentially wheels within wheels, and you have one cluster connected to another through essentially a wormhole, and you have a yin vortex, one cluster spinning this way clockwise, and then a yang vortex, one cluster spinning counterclockwise, and one draws in the energy and the other spits it out and reconfigures it. So you basically have transmutation of elements happening on some of these videos, and it's very fascinating because you see the metals actually literally liquidate and form like strands, and they're not hot, by the way. There's room temperature. So it's what we call a low energy nuclear reaction. It's producing a electromagnetic nuclear reaction at the atomic level, at the microscopic scale, and at temperatures that are, at or near room temperature or manageable in some systems.
The experiments became known as the Hutchinson effect. Although controversy still surrounds his work in this field, there are many scientists who have validated Hutchinson's pioneering research.
Like Ken Shoulders and
Reading
his
some
amazing
articles on the
charged
internet
clusters.
about Moses, that he was basically also electrical genius, and felt that if he could have a special machine, a special arc, beautiful, actually quite a beautiful piece, and it produced these sparks, that he could indeed carry, let's say, the word of God or Jesus through by showing this off as an energy source, but not understanding exactly what it is.
Yeah, these are the cherubim drawings. That's a base sketch of them.
Yeah.
This is a more detailed sketch of the wing.
So that sits on top of...
So Malcolm Bendel, the inventor of the thunderstorm generator, has a different theory about the Ark of the Covenant. As I've kind of mentioned before, I'm not sure if it contradicts or maybe intersects in some way with Hutchinson's theory about the Ark of the Covenant. But basically his theory is that the Egyptians found a craft, they called it a shipwreck, with basically the elements to make the Ark of the Covenant and the Molten Sea Ark on them. And they sold the Molten Sea Ark to King Solomon. And what we see here is, if you watch my video I just released on real life flux capacitor, this goes into the Hutchinson effect, and some of his experiments produced a purplish metal, right? It turned the metal purple. And this is what King Solomon described as Malcolm Bendel tells it in his old text as orichalcum, which is a purplish metal, and they found these ingots of orichalcum on this craft, and it was an Atlantis remnant, a remnant of Atlantis, basically. And according to him, I believe he mentioned that the Egyptians tried to replicate the Ark, and that's what you see in the pyramid in the King's Chamber, an attempt to replicate the Ark of the Covenant's technology. Yeah, I stream unavailable.
The box. Yeah, these.
Yeah, I had it paused. Oh yeah. Well, it looks like my stream got shut down.